Hello, cooking enthusiasts. I am back, and I am back with actually a relatively simple recipe. These are my Spelt and Dulce de Leche biscuits. This is actually a recipe I worked on and tried out quite a while ago, but it was absolutely delicious. Kind of a hybrid of a very laminated biscuit and a very fluffy biscuit with a definite dessert sweet aspect to it. As I mentioned, this uses Dulce de Leche and it's meant to be used with my extra caramelized Dulce de Leche that I make in the pressure cooker for at least 3 hours and up to 4 hours at pressure. I think this prevents the biscuit from becoming too sweet, but if you're using a less caramelized Dulce, you could simply cut it back in the recipe. But first, let's get to the dry ingredients. I was using a mixture of spelt flour and pastry/cake flour. My spelt flour was a little on the coarse side, so I opted to combine the flours and give them a quick pulse in a food processor, but that is optional. I found that the dough ended up quite wet and sticky, so you could probably easily add 25 to 50 grams of additional pastry flour at this stage, or like I did, you can simply add it as needed when rolling out the dough. For leavening, we are of course using baking powder and baking soda. I wanted to get you guys some mass measurements for this, but I appear to have lost the photos. So simply do 4 teaspoons of baking powder and an optional teaspoon of baking soda depending on your wet ingredients. The primary wet ingredient for this dough is actually 250 grams of crème fraîche. I make my own crème fraîche with yogurt culture, but if you don't feel like using crème fraîche, you can use an equivalent amount of regular heavy cream. Finally, we have the star of the show, which is 200 grams of my extra dark pressure cooker Dulce de Leche. This particular one, I believe, was again 3.5 hours, so very caramelized and almost slightly burnt. If you're using a more normal Dulce de Leche, I would cut the amount roughly in half. There is also 5 grams, or roughly half a tablespoon, of salt, and of course 100 grams of butter that you want to cut into actually relatively large cubes and put in the freezer before making the dough. So, to actually make the biscuits, I thoroughly coat the frozen butter in the dry ingredients before adding the wet ingredients, which themselves should be thoroughly combined together. This results in a very wet and sticky dough with purposefully large chunks of butter in it that then needs to rest in the fridge for at least 10 minutes. From here, I really just prefer to take my time, rolling out the dough as best as possible, doing a fold or two, and then letting it rest in the fridge for another 5 or 10 minutes. Because the dough is relatively moist and dense, it's never going to be super flaky, but I went for about 10 folds total to get some nice layering. You could probably do less folding if you don't mind some big pockets of butter occasionally. And in addition to adding flour, you may want to use parchment paper or plastic wrap to help you roll out or manipulate the dough. Once you're happy with the number of folding, you can roll them out to your desired thickness and cut them up. I went for relatively thick biscuits that were rectangular to somewhat reduce waste, but again, this is totally optional. And then you want to bake them off at 425 Fahrenheit. Mine went for about 10 to 12 minutes, but again, you can judge yours depending on how you cut them. And that's about it. If you make these, please let me know. Again, they are a bit on the dessert cake side, but because of the extra dark Dulche de Leche, they also have some of that bitterness to them. If you have any questions about this recipe, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching.